house, proceeded forward, saw a patient on the floor to the right, proceeded to the patient to start an assessment and evaluation.
And then Captain Keller had already come in.
I'm pretty confident, yes, he would have been quicker getting off the truck and inside.
And so you did your assessment, and then what?
My assessment revealed that he was unresponsive, no pulse, no breathing, so I would have started CPR, started chest compressions.
Did you do that with his shirt on?
I would have lifted that out of the way so I could find the proper landmarks.
So you had said that you saw that there was, let's see, 2 gunshot wounds, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you saw that through the shirt? Or how did you assess that when you first entered? That's my question.
Once I'm doing CPR, I can see 2 bullet holes in the shirt. I can see that on the chest and on the abdomen. I can see the wounds as I'm looking at the chest and doing chest compressions.
Okay. And then he had on what color shirt?
I wouldn't have recalled other than, I guess, the video yesterday. I think it was a dark colored shirt I think we saw on the screen. And
so you had talked yesterday about the blood being more blood on chest, not pooled around your knees, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
And so with the dark shirt, was it hard to see the blood? I'm kind of trying to see what you saw when you entered.
I remember seeing blood on the chest. I remember not seeing blood on the abdomen.
And there were holes in the shirt, 2 holes in the front side?
I would, best of my recall, yes.
Okay. And when did you cut off the shirt, and how does that procedure work?
I continued doing CPR, chest compressions. One of my other colleagues would have cut that off, and knowing that the shirt maybe is potentially evidence, that's why I said to her, don't cut through where the holes are. So she could have cut down the side instead of on the top of the body.
And do you use like a special scissors or something for that?
Yeah, we have some trauma shears in our equipment.
Okay. And who was that? Was that Phelps? Or?
I believe that was firefighter Kaczynski.
Okay. Kaczynski, that's one I didn't have. So who all was sitting there with you that was on scene at that time?
Firefighter Fife would have been there. Mm-hmm. Firefighter Kaczynski, the 3 of us, kind of like we saw in the video or the picture yesterday. All 3 of us around the patient, while Captain Keller was standing back a little bit, like you saw in the picture.
Okay. You said that you had been a CPR instructor for 12 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And was that for the last 12 years or 12 years ago?
Approximate dates 2004 to 2016, let's say.
Okay. And so have you taught people who have never done CPR before?
Have I taught those individuals? Yes.
Right. And not just like people renewing their certification, but both?
Correct.
Okay. How many people would you say that you've taught that have never done CPR before?
Never done CPR, and it's probably in the hundreds over that long of doing that.
So you'd be familiar with how a first-timer would react?
Yeah, you try to forewarn them what to expect.
Okay. So these first-timers, they have to be taught the appropriate place to place their hands. Would that be fair?
That is part of the course, yes.
And so do you show them, or do you just tell them in class where to put their hands?
It's a video-based system through American Heart. There's a curriculum that we would have been following.
Okay. So if you could only tell them, like over the phone, that might be difficult for them to know the correct placement of their hands if they've never done it before.
I guess it depends on the instructions that the dispatcher gave. Ultimately, if I was telling somebody over the phone, you want to put your hands on their chest, on the lower part of the chest. It's that kind of simple, so to speak.
Okay. But without the video, if you were teaching a class and you didn't have the video, it might be difficult, right? For a bunch of first timers?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled. You can answer.
Does it mean answer? Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you repeat the question then?
Yeah, so it might be difficult. If you didn't have the video, it might be difficult, for a bunch of first timers to know exactly what to do if you just had to tell them middle of the chest, lower chest.
You could obviously show on a person. You could show on yourself.
If you couldn't show them and you could only tell them, could it be difficult?
I suppose it's possible depending on the person.
Okay, that's fair. So do you think that your CPR class would be fairly successful if you had no visuals?
Objection, relevance, speculation.
Next question.
I got it, Your Honor. So if a person had never done it before and was just told how to do it, is it possible that they might not be acquainted with where to put their hands?
It's possible.
And it would also be possible that they might not do it properly.
That could be possible too.
And right now when you're teaching CPR, and I didn't say you are teaching right now, but if you're teaching a class, are they just doing percussions now? There's no breathing in the mouth, is that correct?
It's going to depend on the level of the class. As far as the lay rescuer, people that have never done it before that just want to have the training, it's evolved and we're teaching compression only. That is a form of CPR now also, just doing chest compressions.
And how long do you teach to do that for? How long of a period before you take a rest or?
Well, it varies depending on if the patient is an adult or a child. There are different guidelines that American Heart offers. So in those courses, they're getting to learn information for adults and children and infants also.
Correct, right. So for an adult, how long, like 30, 100, 150? It's been a while, so just wondering.
With an adult, they're also taught they need to call for help right away also. So that's a factor. Are they alone? Is somebody else able to call? Can they call, put the phone on speaker, start, while talking to 911? And then they would just keep going until help arrives.
So there's no timing, like you take a 10-second break, you just do compressions?
Not for that type of level of CPR, there wasn't.
Okay. So it's helpful if you had someone there that you could take turns, like I do 100 and then you do 100, because it's kind of exhausting, right?
Objection, compound question, relevance.
I'll sustain as to compound question. You can re-ask the question ask it in a different way. Go ahead.
So how long did you administer the CPR before you did the flip over? How long do you think that was?
Before we rolled him to look at the back, is that what
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
I would estimate maybe up to a minute.
Okay. And then were you counting compressions? Is that what you were doing during that time, or do you not count? You just do it for a certain amount of time?
I don't recall if I was counting. I was doing the chest compressions while waiting for the rest of the team to arrive and for us to continue assessing, see if we're going to continue to work the patient and utilize more equipment.
And there were 3 of you there?
4 total, but 3 by the patient.
Okay. And then you could take turns, right? Like trade off if you needed to?
If we needed to, yes.
So that'd be a lot easier than when you're just there by yourself. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know how long how long after the rolling over did you started doing compressions again? Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what I had.
Yes, I believe so.
And how long did you do that for?
I would estimate maybe upwards of another minute
So maybe 2 minutes total?
during that sequence, yes.
And was there another sequence?
At some point, we would have stopped doing chest compressions so we could evaluate the heart rhythm. That's on the heart monitor.
With the heart
And
monitor?
you can't be doing compressions to evaluate that.
Okay. And then you didn't continue compressions after the heart monitor at all?
From what I recall, I resumed again in brief discussion as far as what direction we were going to go.
And what were the results of the heart monitor?
There was no electrical activity.
And how long was the heart monitor applied compared to when you started the first compressions?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Maybe you can reword it or.
Sure. How far into your treatment, I should say, did you guys stop and do the heart monitor?
I would estimate that the monitor probably was on within 2 minutes of making patient contact.
Okay. And how long does that take?
To do what? To put it on?
Well, yeah, to put it on, get a reading, and decide what you're going to do next.
It could take, you got to turn it on, open up a compartment to get the pads out of that compartment. You've got to open that packaging to be able to apply it to the patient's chest area. If the chest is wet, which there's some blood, you need to dry that so it's going to adhere more properly, read more properly. So you could be looking at 30 seconds to a minute possibly of working through that.
Okay. And did you have to do that in this case, is remove blood to stick them on?
I would assume so, but I was doing chest compressions, so that would have been one of the other two firefighters kind of working through that.
Okay. So I understand correctly, you said when you rolled him over, did you cut the shirt in the back also to see the exit wounds? Is that?
No, we only had to cut the shirt one time. That was when he was still laying on his back. You cut it down the side, and that opens it up to where then you can remove it from the body, pull it off.
So you did pull it off completely at some point?
More than likely, I would say yes. That's typically what we would do.
Okay. But you don't remember if you did that in this case?
I know that I didn't do that because I was doing chest compressions, so I would assume one of my colleagues did that completely. That's typically what we do.
Okay. And so you're back to doing the compressions for the third time, and then you stopped that at some point. Was there another procedure after that?
No, at that point in time is when we would have called the patient.
And who announces that?
Ultimately, I remember our captain, since he's in charge of the crew, would be considered the lead medic. He has the most experience. He's also charting the call, kind of running it, kind of made that final decision.
And that would be Captain Keller? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then he did call it at, do you know what time?
It would have, I don't have it memorized, no. It would have been like in the charting that he was doing.
And who documents that?
He would have
time?
documented
He would have
that.
done it? Okay. In preparation for your testimony here today, did you review the 911 call at all?
No, not in preparation for today. Not the actual audio, no.
No.
No, not today, not for this.
What did you review for today?
I was able to look at the incident times were dispatched by Phoenix Fire Department. I was able to look at the paper documentation, I was able to see my testimony from Idaho. I was able to see my testimony with Chandler PD when they came to the fire station a couple of weeks after this incident.
And what paper documentation did you actually take a look at?
It would have been the chart that Captain Keller documented.
And what does that chart consist of?
There would be scene times, date, time, address, patient information, name, address, maybe medical history, things that we, a narrative of what we discovered, what we've done, treatments that we've done. The heart rhythm from the monitor gets attached to it.
So that would all be in Captain Keller's report?
Correct.
And you did take a look at that in preparation for today?
Yes.
And did you write a report regarding this incident?
No.
You don't have to document anything?
Just one person documents the call.
So for all of the people that were there from fire?
Correct.
Okay. So that's the total report, is you just give your input to him and he puts it into the report?
Correct.
And that's the same for the other two firefighters that were along with you?
That's correct.
Okay. So they don't have their own individual reports as well?
No.
Okay. And what time were you dismissed from the scene?
We probably only remained an additional 5 to 10 minutes. The chart would have that time. I don't necessarily have it by memory.
So how long were you at the scene total?
If I had to estimate without looking at it, I would say approximately 20, 25 minutes.
Okay. And then you were like the driver of the truck, right? Was that your responsibility? So
Correct.
you drove in and then did you drive out as well?
Correct.
Okay. So if you guys arrived around 8:41 or something like that, then you left around 25 minutes later? Would that be accurate?
I guess when I was giving that estimate of the 2025, I was even including our dispatch time from the time we're dispatched driving to the scene. So if you're wanting to know actual on scene time, it might be closer. Instead of the 20 to 25, it might be more of a closer to 20 solid.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that typical for a call?
It can vary depending on the calls.
Okay. So what other things did you do in that 20 minutes besides administer to the patient?
So I'm including in that time while we're staged around the corner, waiting for PD to arrive, then for PD to clear the scene, for us to drive to the scene. There's the time with the patient, and then there's going to be the cleanup afterwards. Removing our equipment, going outside. Maybe the equipment needs to be cleaned, restocked, ready for another call. So when we drive away, we're ready to respond to another emergency and then drive away.
Okay. So when you were done with the patient and you were going through that procedure of cleaning, were you in the house or did you exit the house?
We'll remove all of our stuff and we'll go outside, typically to the front bumper of the fire truck.
And then what do you do?
We have cleaning chemicals on the truck that we could get out to, clean our equipment up to reuse it. We've got cabinet with restock to be able to restock anything that might need to be. So we'll take care of those things to be ready to respond to another call.
Okay. And while you were out front, did you see Alex on the curb?
I did see somebody on the curb, or I don't remember if he was on the curb or standing, but I remember seeing somebody with an officer or officers. I don't recall how many people might have been together.
Okay. And did you converse with those officers at all during that time?
I don't believe so. I don't really remember conversing with any officers on scene. That would have been more Captain Keller, charting, documenting, kind of getting information from them. He would be able to answer that question.
Okay. So did you, was anybody in firefighting on your team, the four of you that were there, was anyone asked to take a look at Alex?
We were not.
Let's see. Have you spoken to the media about this case?
Can I object? Relevance?
What's the relevance?
What is the relevance, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Just to know how many times he's given testimony?
Your Honor, I'm
All right,
going
I'm gonna
to, maybe we can
hold on.
sidebar.
Yeah, I don't want to. All right, let's go on a sidebar.
Just a few more questions. Mr. Cowden, is it possible that if there was a wound to the chest, that doing compressions on that could cause other damage?
I suppose it's possible, but ultimately it doesn't matter. If the heart isn't beating, it's what you got to do. It's the appropriate treatment.
So would a common person who doesn't know how to do CPR maybe hesitate about pushing on a bullet wound?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
But you wouldn't.
Can you repeat the question?
You wouldn't hesitate to push on the bullet wound if the heart was stopped?
No, I wouldn't.
And you would have to assess if the heart was stopped in order to do that?
Yes, you would check a pulse like we did. We would, use our equipment like we did.
Okay. So the two wounds that you saw when you first got there, one was in the chest and one was where?
In the abdomen.
On the right side or the left side?
I would be speculating as to the specific spot or area without actually maybe seeing documentation.
Okay. And can you tell me about I think there's a word for it, but I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. The crunch.
When doing the chest compressions,
Correct.
I don't know if there was necessarily a certain word that I used, but you feel the sternum crack. I compare it to, like I said before, cracking your knuckles.
And how much pressure would you have to apply to get the crack?
That could vary, like depending on who you're doing CPR on.
Like on an adult male?
I mean, it could still vary depending on, the strength of the person doing CPR also. It could vary depending on the size of that adult male also. So I've never seen like any science that might say you got to deliver this much pounds of force or anything.
Right,
So,
like 400 pounds of pressure or something?
yeah, I don't know. Right.
Okay.
You're just
There
going to push
isn't-
hard.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Can't have you talk over one another. So he's finished his answer. Go ahead and answer your next question.
So there's no determined amount of pressure, correct?
Just hard and fast. When it comes to people doing CPR, for us, we're working as a team. We have equipment that can tell us if we're pushing hard enough. For a person without that equipment, just hard and fast.
Okay, that's fair. And then they don't always get the crack, right? It's not always going to happen.
If they're doing it forcefully enough, they would.
So if they didn't do it forcefully enough, it wouldn't.
That is possible, yes.
But then when you come in, the professionals, and you apply the correct amount of force, then you would hear the crack.
Yes,
And is that possible that happened in this case?
it is possible.
Okay, no more questions.
All right. Redirect.
Does 911 have to regularly instruct people on how to perform CPR?
I don't know if I can answer that since I don't, do that since I'm not 911.
Have you regularly heard while listening to the radio 911 instructing people on how to do CPR?
We have had PTI information when we're responding to a call that will tell us that they are either performing CPR or being instructed to.
So you've seen in the past that 911 is prepared to handle individuals who may not know how to perform CPR.
Yes,
And that's to help try to keep the patient's blood moving while you're en route.
correct.
You were asked a lot about trading off and other people doing compressions. At this scene with this patient, Charles Vallow, did you ever trade off and have someone else do the CPR compressions?
No,
You were the only one doing the CPR compressions.
yes,
Were you doing CPR while another paramedic or EMT was getting the heart monitor ready?
yes,
So this timeline of however long it took them is in conjunction with you still performing CPR.
yes,
You talked about Charles's shirt being cut. If photographs from the scene show his shirt still around his neck, would that indicate that it wasn't removed from him?
After the cutting,
Yeah, so if police, let me ask you this. When you guys are done and he's called deceased, do you put his clothing back on or modify him in any way?
no, we would just take our equipment that's necessary to take.
So if his shirt was still around his neck, then that's how it would have been left.
Correct.
You were asked about whether or not you should perform CPR on a person who has a gunshot wound. Is there any reason why a person with a gunshot wound would not need to have blood circulating through their body to bring oxygen versus some other type of injury?
No,
Is the whole point of CPR to make sure that blood is circulating to get oxygen to their brain
yes,
so that they don't go brain dead?
yes,
And you said that ultimately it wouldn't matter if you cause more injuries because if they're brain dead, who cares, right?
correct.
In your assessment, did you feel that no one had performed CPR on Charles Vallow before you arrived?
I had felt that, and I do know in my testimony to Chandler PD, I had stated that, or it's probably in my testimony that it was not efficient or something to those lines. But I felt like no, it had not.
Okay, you felt like no, it had not been done.
Correct.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
All right, I see at least one juror question. We'll go on a sidebar. Please, if you're a juror and you have any additional questions, pass down your question to the basket. All right, so you're going to come on up here. You're going to stand right here and be sworn in.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, you're going to come up this ramp over here and have a seat to my left. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sir, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Kent Keller. I'm a recently retired captain with Chandler Fire Department.
When did you retire?
April of 2022.
And how long did you work with the Chandler Fire Department?
32 years.
While you were there in, let's talk about 2019, what were your duties? What was your rank?
My rank was captain. I was an engine captain, so a company officer. I was in charge of a 4-person crew. We basically respond for calls to service and the different functions of a.
Did those calls for service include medical calls?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any training in the area of medical treatment yourself?
Yes, I'm a paramedic. I went to paramedic school in 1991.
And can you tell us, is there or was there ongoing type of continuing training to be a paramedic?
Yes, yes, ma'am. There is continuing education throughout the year. You have to have a certain number of hours in each subject, and as well as updates as far as pharmacology or different treatment modalities. So yes, there's constant change.
And the difference between a paramedic and an EMT?
Well, an EMT is EMT-B, EMT basic. A paramedic is an EMT paramedic. So the biggest difference would be invasive treatments. So you're trained with more ability to provide care, cardiology and pharmacology.
When fire gets a call of a person who is shot, what is sort of the normal response? What does fire do when they are coming to a scene and they know a person has been shot?
Well, what they normally would do is you get the dispatch, you look on a map, you route yourself in, and then you would determine a safe place to stage while the scene is secured by PD.
Okay. And then how do you learn that the scene is secure?
In Chandler, anyway, we have interagency communication. So you're on the radio both with Phoenix Dispatch and Chandler PD, direct car to car or to Chandler PD Dispatch.
So you're actually then told by Chandler Police that it's secure and you can come in?
Yes, ma'am. They will give you a scene safe or code 4 and cop talk.
When you arrive on scene as the captain, what is your role when you get there?
My role is scene safety, primary scene safety. That's rule number 1 in everything that we do. And in other words, as I arrive on scene, I'm going to make sure with PD that there are no more threats for our crew and get direction to where we need to do treatment.
When you have this team of 4, how do you determine who does what?
Well, I mean, that's individual crew training, and some crews might have specific jobs. Ours is more of a fill and flow. As you come to, I guess I should say, one person is charting, one person is going to be the paramedic in charge of the call. So he's running the call. His job is bigger picture, and then that'll leave 3 people for hands-on treatment until a 2-person rescue would arrive, an ambulance would arrive to help, if that were the case.
Does fire ever respond to a scene and then advise that a person is deceased?
Certainly.
And if fire responds, determines a person is deceased, and this is potentially a crime scene, what does fire do at that point?
Well, fire then would pick up their gear and leave without disturbing that scene as much as possible. I mean, we have gear. We spread out our gear when we get to a patient. You know, we have monitors and drug boxes and trauma treatment boxes. So as soon as it's determined that the patient is not viable, then you would pick up that gear and leave the scene. What you don't want to do is interfere with any investigation going forward.
And even when you are working on a person, are you trying to limit impacting the scene itself to the best of your ability?
Yes, our job would be to determine if treatment is necessary and then do that treatment regardless. But yes, what I should do, what the captain or whoever that paramedic should do that has the larger picture would be to try and minimize any disturbing of the scene.
But obviously, taking care of the patient is the primary focus, even if that causes the scene to be disturbed.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working on July 11th of 2019 around 8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Do you recall responding to a shooting at 5531 South 4 Peaks in Chandler?
Yes.
When you responded or first went to the scene, did you guys stage like we've discussed?
Yes, ma'am.
And you advised that you're being provided information from 2 different sources?
Yes, our primary source is Phoenix Dispatch. But yes, you are able to monitor Chandler PD as well.
Is Phoenix Dispatch 911?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you're getting what's coming in from 911. Are they relaying information to you?
Yes.
Are things like whether or not the patient is receiving CPR something that is very relevant to you?
Yes.
In this case, did you receive any information regarding that?
Yes. We were told that CPR instruction had been given and CPR was in progress.
Does 911, in your experience in over 30 years, are they able to provide instruction for lay people who may not know how to do 911 or not know how to do CPR compressions?
Yes, they are actually certified to do that. They train and are certified to give that instruction over the phone. So
even though it's only verbal, they've been trained to how to present that to a person over the phone.
Yes.
So you are advised that CPR instructions have been given and that that compressions are being given? Yes.
Been a little while, but yes, I believe that I was told. I do know that instruction. I do remember specifically hearing that CPR in progress. I believe I remember. I would have to, but definitely the CPR instructions had been given.
Does knowing that a person has been receiving CPR impact the way you view a patient when you enter a scene?
Yes.
How?
Well, because it would make the patient more viable. If adequate CPR were given prior to our arrival, then you would hope that good CPR was given and that oxygenated blood was being pushed around the body, which would mean that make the patient more viable at that point.
When you go to a scene where you believe CPR is given, such as this one, was that one of the things, I guess, that was part of your decision-making as you are assessing this patient?
Yes.
Can you talk to us about when you entered this residence, what do you recall?
When I entered the residence, I recall thinking that the house seemed empty, like it was either being moved into or moved out of. So there was no furniture or anything. We had a clear path to where the patient was. And I remember thinking that there's very little in this room other than the patient.
Okay. Did you notice at any point some items around the patient?
The only thing I remember being around the patient was a baseball bat and a ball cap.
And do you recall at this point where those items were in relation to him?
Yes, I believe the baseball bat would have been on the patient's right and the ball cap above him somewhere in the room. I think the baseball bat was against the wall on his right.
Do you recall ever seeing a bullet near the victim?
Once we started assessing, I did see a bullet, a spent round on the floor.
So that's sort of a little bit into you're in
Yes,
the
ma'am.
scene.
Yes.
It wasn't something you initially recognized.
No, no.
While you're in there, was there any officers in the room with you or inside the house?
There was at least one officer still clearing the house, I believe, or at least going through the house. I only recall for sure one officer being interior.
Can you describe for us how the patient, how Charles was laying when you first observed him?
Yes, ma'am. He was laying supine. He was laying on his back. As we entered, his head was towards us, so geographically, I think north. So that's how he was laying supine.
Do you recall anything about his arms or hands where they were?
I don't. To his sides, I don't recall, honestly.
Did you observe any injuries to Charles, this patient?
Yes, he had evidently a gunshot wound to his center chest. Hole in the shirt and a small amount of blood.
Did you recall or notice anything about where the blood was pooling from that shot to the chest?
At that time, I did not, because we have to expose the patient, and the so he's a big guy, so he had a small amount of blood above his sternum.
I'm showing you Exhibit 3 that's previously been admitted. Does that look like?
If it adjusts a little bit, but
Okay.
you can attempt.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Are you able to see that there?
Yes.
Kind of. Does this look like the patient that you were working on?
Yes.
And in this, do you see the blood pooling in Exhibit 3 there?
Yes.
Is that sort of what you were talking about?
Yes. Here in around the collarbone. So there's a divot here that
Would you describe this patient as a fit man?
He seemed to be, yes.
When you saw that pooling like that, did that stand out to you or seem at all impactful in your decision of whether or not CPR had been given prior to your arrival?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because had adequate CPR been given there, I would have expected more blood possibly on there and perhaps a pool of blood under him. I didn't see any blood under him. I mean, when we first got there.
So when you guys first arrived, let's go back to sort of describing the scene. You said that you didn't notice any blood pooling under him.
I did not.
And is that something that you guys are cognizant of since you're going to have to get down and around him?
Yes, but we're more cognizant of it because it would indicate an exit wound. And obviously, the more blood there is, the more the heart was beating or CPR was being done.
Okay. So both the lack of spreading on him is one indication that kind of made you question if CPR had been given?
Yes, ma'am.
And the lack of pooling of blood underneath him was another sort of
Yes.
flag to you that maybe CPR had not been given.
And no one was doing CPR when we got there. Would have been the primary indicator to me. And I say that because if CPR were in progress by PD, if there were an officer there doing CPR, then they would have continued to do CPR until we relieved them.
If a person is shot and deceased and you start giving them compressions, can you still push blood out of those wounds?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at some point when fire arrives and they are assessing a patient, do they, I'm going to put up Exhibit 4 here, do you need to try to remove any garments that might be around those potential gunshot wounds?
Yes, you would expose the patient.
Why is that?
Well, because you don't know for sure how many gunshots there are. You check for exit wounds. Some gunshot wounds, some entry wounds are minimal. You wouldn't see them. You know, you could go through a shirt and not see them. So you expose the patient.
Okay. I have Exhibit 4 up here from body cam from a officer that's previously been admitted. Do you recognize who these people are and where this is?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this you?
It is.
So in this case, at some point, was Charles's shirt cut in any way to allow access to those gunshot wounds?
That would be the norm. Is at this point they would be cutting his shirt.
Do you recall from this scene how many gunshot wounds you observed to the front of Mr. Vallow?
I believe 2.
Okay. Now, when you guys first arrived on scene, do you check the pulse? Like, what do you do when you first get there?
Yes, you would check for pulses, carotid pulse, and obvious signs of life breathing, so chest rise and fall, as you are walking up to a patient.
So in this case, for Charles Vallow, did you guys find a pulse?
No, ma'am.
Did you notice him breathing?
No.
Do you do any other assessments before you start compressions?
No.
So if he's not breathing and you don't see that he has a pulse, why begin CPR? Why start compressions?
Because you don't know how long he has not been breathing or not had a pulse.
Okay.
He could have just stopped those things moments before we got there, which would make him a viable candidate, or a viable patient, rather.
And does, again, the fact that you believed CPR had been performed prior to you arriving also play into your decision to
Yes.
see if he's viable?
Yes.
As other officers are doing compressions, what are you doing there?
So I am charting. So I am, in this particular case, I was running the call. So I'm going down a checklist, gathering information, listening to what they're telling me, and having them. I'm directing them throughout the call.
Okay. So at some point, are compressions stopped to assess the patient in other ways?
Yes, after a heart monitor is on.
Okay. And so are compressions able to be performed while someone else is getting the heart monitor ready?
Yes, compressions continue throughout until you stop compressions to check for pulses.
Okay. Do you ever want to check a patient who you see has gunshot wounds, such as Mr. Vallow here, to see if there's exit wounds?
Yes, ma'am, immediately. So they would have cut his shirt, taken his shirt off, rolled him, checked for exit wounds, and then rolled him back and continued compressions.
In this case, are you documenting your observations and others about what you observed when he was rolled?
Yes.
So when he's rolled, you're looking at his back?
Back, right, from the back of the head to the back of the feet.
Okay. So he's completely rolled over so that you can see his back?
Yes.
Did you notice anything about Mr. Vallow's back that may have indicated he'd been there for significantly longer than you originally thought?
He did have lividity. So there was modeling, skin modeling and lividity. Once the shirt comes off, then you could see modeling on the skin, and lividity had begun to form.
Can you tell us what modeling means?
Modeling is sort of a patchy-looking skin caused from hypoxia or not enough oxygen getting to the skin. I mean, you can have mottled skin for different reasons, but in this case, it would be from his heart not beating.
Okay. And then you said lividity. What does
Yes,
that
ma'am.
mean?
So lividity is the pooling of blood, and that takes longer, much longer. So the blood will begin to leave the tissues and gravity drain to the lowest part of the body.
So when the blood isn't being circulated by either CPR or the heart, the blood just starts to pool there.
Yes.
And so you noticed that as well when he was rolled?
Yes.
Did you notice any exit wounds?
I did notice at least one exit wound, yes.
After you looked at his back, do you recall, I guess, when in this process you checked his heart monitor, when that was done?
I do not. This all happens simultaneously. You ask what these different people are doing. They're doing all of those things simultaneously. So the patient is exposed, CPR has begun, and the evaluation, the rest of the evaluation is happening. So timeline, it's on the heart monitor, I'm sure, but a lot of it happens simultaneously. That answer the question? You asked that again. I'm sorry.
I believe so. Do you recall what the heart monitor results were?
Asystole. No electrical rhythm in the heart. Flat line for.
Do you ever look at a patient's pupils?
Yes, ma'am. Always.
What's that for?
Because if it's just a brain function. If you shine light on pupils, they react. When the brain stops to function, hypoxia sets in, the pupils will dilate and remain fixed, so they won't change. They're non-reactive to light.
What did you see with Mr. Vallow?
They were fixed and non-reactive.
So we heard about the pooling of the blood on Mr. Vallow when you first arrived. As CPR was being done, did you notice any blood being pushed out of his body?
A little bit more. Again, he is on his back. Exit wound was in his back, but yes, we increased the amount of blood under the patient by doing CPR.
When you first arrived, did you notice any active bleeding?
No, ma'am.
What's the relevance of no active bleeding?
No heartbeat.
Were you advised of Scott Cowden's information about when he started CPR, hearing the crunch, or feeling, I guess, the crunch of him performing CPR?
Was I advised of it?
Yeah, did he let you know that?
No, but that would be expected.
And is that expected if CPR hadn't been performed?
No, not adequately. Again, big guy, so that the sternum the cartilage holding the sternum to the ribs breaks, gives way. So, and that actually makes CPR much easier.
In this case, you came in, he wasn't breathing, he was pulseless, his pupils were dilated, the heart monitor said there was no activity, correct? Yes. When you looked at his back, you noticed both mottling, which meant that the blood wasn't moving through his body?
Yes, and mottling was on the front as well.
Okay.
So as that blood pools, so it leaves the tissue, that's gonna hasten the mottling part of it.
So you noticed that when the shirt was then cut and
Yes.
he was exposed,
Yes.
as well as when he was rolled.
Yes.
And then you also noticed on the back the lividity of the blood pooling there.
Yes.
When you, I guess, obtained all of that information, did you end life-saving measures?
Yes.
Who decides to end life-saving measures?
I do, as well as the rest of the crew. So Scott Cowden is also a paramedic, and he concurred. So then we call that in, and we cease life-saving function, or attempts rather.
When you cease life-saving measures at a scene where someone's been shot and is now deceased at the scene, do you leave sort of any attached medical devices with him?
Well, as little as possible. So what would have been left on him would have been defibrillator pads, probably EKG electrodes, and probably a CPR puck.
Okay. Now, when you arrived on scene or when you were exiting, did you ever notice any male outside that might have been with some police officers?
Oh, a person?
Yeah.
Yes. One person, one male.
And did you notice him when you arrived or when you left?
Well, when I arrived, my job in particular is to kind of get a larger overview of the scene. So I did notice a person talking with PD.
And when you observed this person, did you notice anything that he appeared to be injured in any way?
No.
So no obvious injuries to you?
No.
If you had been asked to treat him, would you have?
Of course.
Did you see that same person outside when you left?
Yes.
And when you left, did you observe anything about him again that he appeared to be injured in any way?
No.
Did you ever see a female and a female teenager at the scene?
Yes.
Where did you see them?
They were across the street from the house we were at.
Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I see the adult, yes.
Can you point her out and let us know what she's wearing?
Dark blazer at the defendant's table. Dark clothes, I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. State will ask the record to reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Mitchell?
Did you overhear her talking or saying anything?
I did overhear her talking with the police officers, or someone said something about not getting invited to a pool party because of the commotion at the house or something, so.
What? Did you have any formal interaction with her?
No.
When you sort of completed and left this scene, looking back and assessing it based upon your training, your experience, what you observed and what was done to Mr. Vallow at the scene, would you agree that Charles Vallow was dead before you entered the house?
Yes.
Based upon your training, your experience, what you observed and what was done to Mr. Vallow, would you agree that it was highly unlikely that anyone had performed CPR on Charles Vallow prior to fire arriving?
Yes.
I have no other questions, Your Honor.
All right, Cross.
Captain Keller.
Yes.
You were first on the scene?
The police department was first, but yes, we were the first fire unit.
First fire on the scene. Mm-hmm. And can you explain to us what staging is exactly? I'm not really sure.
Sure. Staging, when there's some violent incident, the fire department, the firefighters don't have protective equipment for that sort of a scene. So we will go to a place where close to whatever the dispatched address is, that we would be a place of safety, but close, so that as soon as the scene is made safe by the police department, then we would enter into the scene.
So that would be like a couple houses away, or?
Could be a couple
Really?
houses, could be behind cover. In this case, it was gunshot was the call, so you want to make sure that you are a little ways away,
Okay.
in case there was more gunshots.
Right. So you parked somewhere on the street, but a couple houses down from the house, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then part of that staging is you stay there until you get the all clear?
Yes, until the police department says that it's safe to enter the scene.
Okay. And you were wearing body cam that day?
No, we don't wear body
Oh,
cam.
you don't wear body cam? Okay. You were just that was a picture from you on the body cam?
On one of
On
the
someone
police
else's
officers.
body cam?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you use any instruments to obtain current body temperature? Do you guys have an instrument for that?
No.
No? Would that help you give a more approximate time of calling a time of death?
It wouldn't help me. I'm not trained to do that, so we don't have that. It's not within our scope of practice to determine that.
It's not part of paramedics training?
No.
Okay. You explained the modeling being patchy looking skin
Yes.
because of no oxygen to the skin. Is that correct?
Decreased, yes.
And so will that continue to increase? I don't really understand, like it, would you say modeling is complete or in progress? How does that work?
I would say in progress. As less and less tissue had oxygenation, I would say it continues to model.
So would you say it was in early progress or late progress? How would you estimate that?
I could not say early or late, just modeling.
That modeling was present
Yes.
at that point. So how long would it take for modeling to become present? That's kind of my question.
I don't know how long.
So it could be like
different for different people, I suppose.
So it could be a minute, 5 minutes.
Yeah, he's already indicated.
Hold on. Rephrase the question, I'll allow it, but make sure you let him answer before you ask your next question.
Okay. So it could be just a few minutes, possibly?
Possibly. I don't know.
Okay. And then lividity, you explained as a pooling of blood. The blood leaves the tissues and goes to the bottom. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you saw that as well?
Yes.
And in your estimation, would that have happened soon? You know, oh, that's not a good question. In your estimation, that had begun?
Yes.
And was it advancing how far?
He had lividity on the back of his torso,
So does lividity,
backs of his arms.
does lividity start immediately after the heart stops? Is that what you were saying?
I suppose it does.
Okay. And if you were on any kind of medication, would that affect that as well?
I couldn't say.
And what time of death did you document? You were making the document, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what time of death did you document?
I did not put time of death, but I put a time of treatment being ceased, and I don't recall what that time was. It's on that report.
And you had stated that you were listening to dispatch on the radio, is that correct?
Yes.
So were you listening to the actual 911 operator speaking?
No, whoever is calling, if you call on the phone to a 911 operator, they would give that information to a dispatcher who would then dispatch a call with the pertinent information.
Okay, so you were getting kind of updates as it went along?
No, you get the initial call, and then if it were pertinent for us, like the scene is secure, PD says the scene is secure, go in. PD would call dispatch, and dispatch would then call us.
Okay, so were you aware at all that they had asked him to come outside?
No,
Okay. You just saw that he was outside, but you didn't know that the 911 operator had told him to come outside, is that correct?
I did not know who he was or how he was involved in it when
Okay.
we arrived.
So on those dispatch updates, it wasn't saying like shooter is in-house or shooter is outside or anything like that? Okay. That wouldn't be.
Not to us.
That's what I'm saying.
That might be to the police department, but that's not something we would hear.
Okay. In this case, Captain Keller, do you know for a fact that CPR had not been given?
I do not know for a fact.
And do you know for a fact that CPR had been given?
I know for a fact that we gave CPR.
Prior to your coming in?
No.
No further questions?
All right, redirect.
Which do you see first, modeling or lividity? when the heart stops and the blood is no longer pumping?
Modeling.
Okay.
I would expect to see modeling first.
And you told us, I think on direct, that lividity is something that you see much later.
Yes. I would expect that, yes.
Have you treated patients before within a few minutes of their heart stopping?
Yes.
Do you see lividity in those people?
No.
Do you see modeling in those people?
No. You see skin conditions change in those people, gray or cooling, moist, moisture, but not modeling or lividity.
So you're not here to tell us how long it takes for those to form, right?
I don't know.
All you can tell us is that it's something that you see in patients who are deceased
Yes.
and have been deceased long enough, whatever time period that is, for that to happen.
Right. It is an indication of the patient no longer being a viable patient.
And that was one of the things that you noted and used in determining to end any life-saving measures?
Yes.
Now, is the only way to know if CPR has been given to be there with the person watching them?
No.
What else can tell you that CPR was given to a patient?
Well, PD on scene arriving would witness, the best way would be witness CPR.
That's the best way. Is there any other ways?
Well, yes. Again, you would have an indentation in the chest. The sternum would likely have been cracked loose from the rib cage. And there would be, in the case of trauma, increased bleeding. You do CPR or CCR sometimes when there's not trauma, cardiac.
In this case, were other indicators the blood that was pooling only at the neck and not spread out further?
Yes.
The lack of pooling underneath the victim?
Yes, and the mechanical action of doing compressions with a gunshot wound right there would have spread blood in that area as well. It wouldn't just have gone where gravity is.
So where you saw the blood pooling was where gravity, a low spot.
That was my interpretation of it, yes.
And you did not observe spread blood across his chest.
No.
Would ongoing CPR movement of the blood through the body have also limited the modeling you may have seen?
Perhaps.
Ultimately, is it your opinion that it is unlikely that CPR was given to this patient prior to fire arriving?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Are there any juror questions? I see at least one coming down. Please pass those down. Put on the white noise first. All right, we have some juror questions for you. Was there any attempt to gain venous access to administer medications to aid the heart and functioning, i.e. ephedrine? If no, why not?
It's not indicated for trauma. It doesn't, if there's no blood to pump or the heart has stopped pumping, increasing how fast the heart pumps with ephedrine would do nothing. So in trauma, it is not indicated.
Was ACLS protocol followed?
Yes.
Was there a physician patched in?
No, there's no patch required for cessation of treatment. It is part of our ability and part of our training to determine non-viability.
Are fire department personnel allowed to call a patient's death?
Yes. However, time of death is a different thing if that's what you're asking. In other words, we are allowed to stop attempting to do life-saving treatment if it's merely a recovery. So, does that answer?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have if the defense, first of all, let me check. Are there any other juror questions for this witness? I don't see any. The defense can follow up based on those questions if you want.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, how about the state?
Just a couple. Sir, when would you use ephedrine?
Well, if you had just asystole, but it was a cardiac-based code. If the heart had stopped due to some disease state, electric shock, for instance, you would use epi. Are you saying epinephrine is what you're saying, right?
When you're looking at whether or not to push drugs to try to get the heart to restart, you're looking at the type of trauma that caused the heart to stop.
And how long it's been since the heart stopped.
So in a place where you said there is trauma, meaning like a gunshot wound?
Like a hole in the vessel, yes.
So that is treated differently than if someone has a heart attack and...
Yes. Yes.
You were asked about...
These are all algorithms, protocols that are given for us to operate on scenes under medical control to whoever asked about the patch.
What is then the ACLS protocol?
Advanced cardiac life support. And it's just, again, it's a flow chart. Are there obvious signs of death? Yes. Stop CPR.
So here, you followed that protocol and stopped CPR.
Yes, ma'am. CCR technically, but yes.
You were asked about contacting a physician, a patch or something for a cessation of treatment.
Right.
Are there times where you do patch in with a physician?
Sure. You would patch en route, not for a code. You would patch en route and give a doctor, or actually it would be a nurse answering the phone, but you would let them know what you have and what treatment you have given and what treatment you are going to give en route to their facility to continue care. We are primarily to stabilize and turn over the patient, making it more viable for a rescue.
So when you terminate treatment because a patient is not viable, you cannot revive them, you don't need to talk to a doctor about that.
No, you you need to call in that you did it. So there would have been a patch after that, but you don't have to call in to cease treatment.
So you don't need a blessing by a doctor to stop life-saving treatment?
Well, no, we have the blessing through our certifications and through our training. So we are operating under a doctor's license at any time we are operating. So that doctor or this group of doctors usually understands our training level and agrees to trains us to make that decision, yes.
And so ultimately, as a paramedic, you have the authority to use that protocol to determine when you are no longer able to revive or save the life of a patient.
Cease life-saving functions, yes.
And that's what you did here.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
All right, you can step down. We're going to take our lunch recess. I'll remind the jury of the admonition. We will resume at 1:30 p.m.
All rise for the jury.
What it had available to it at the time, and advancements in technology may change what was able to be extracted, but that's different than the state withholding information.
That was the state's reading of the affidavit. I think the other concern comes from the fact that back on March 18th, when the state was filing motions to preclude Lonnie Dworkin, the court had a discussion with the defendant about this, about whether or not she wanted to waive time to have time for her expert to do this. And at that time, the court asked her if there was any one device that she wanted to review, which was, from the defendant's own mouth, Charles Vallow's phone. So now we have a motion that was filed, mind you, 7 days after they received the affidavit from their expert. So they held off on disclosing that while we weren't in trial, and then in the middle of trial, filed it, asking for information on numerous other devices that are in various other police agencies' possession. So, although I think ultimately, I mean, the big issue is clearly the state would object to any motion to dismiss. There is no exculpatory evidence. There's no even discussion of exculpatory evidence in Mr. Dworkin's statement or their very minimally fact-invasive motion, let alone any prosecutorial misconduct. But I think we're back to the issue of Mr. Dworkin and what he's going to be permitted to bring in or talk about at this point in this trial.
All right, did you want to argue that motion right now?
Not right now.
Well, when do you want to argue it?
Well, the main problem, do you want me to argue it right now?
I'm not asking you to, but I indicated when I read your motion that it does appear not to be any discovery violation, but that the state turned over the evidence that it had at the time, and advances in that software that maybe make more information available upon an extraction than was available when they did the extraction isn't a discovery violation. I'm looking at this as more of a discovery request for additional information, which at this point in the game, I'll allow you to do your discovery requests, but I don't know that any information that's discovered between now and the end of trial would be coming in because it's so late.
in reading that affidavit, I would agree with you that that was my initial thought as well. But the problem is that the problem that we have here is that that software was available and those things were available and they were not handed over from the state. They were never handed over from the state, and they've had that information for years. So that's why we filed that motion, is because of our expert was able to download the one device that we got, that he was able to see that the complete downloads were never given, that these are reports of downloads when we know that the state had available the entire complete extraction in the first place. They just didn't give us the entire extraction. They gave us the reports of the extractions, the ones that they wanted us to have. So those were available according to the technology. They just didn't give them to us on all of the devices. But we only have proof of it on one device because that's the only device that we were able to do in a timely manner.
All right. I want to clarify a little bit. They gave you the full extraction that was available to them at the time.
No, they pulled a report from the full extraction and gave us that. That's what they gave us.
State want to respond?
Your Honor, when you extract data from a device like a cell phone, it is put into a formula where it is not readable by anyone, which is why then you use the Cellbrite technology to basically parse that data into areas that we can read and view and review. So
Is that what was given to the
that
defense?
is what was given to the defense, was the 2019 or 2020 version of the Cellbrite technology that was used to take that extraction and put it into a readable form so that you can look at, for instance, not having to search through all this data to try to find out a text message. All of them are put together with dates and times and people and locations.
Your Honor, I would request that we can have a hearing on this so that I can bring in Lonnie Dworkin and he can explain that what they did not give us.
Well, just reading his affidavit is what they gave you is what they had available to them at the time. There's no affirmative duty for them to, every time a new software version comes out that makes maybe more data available, to rerun all the information.
We're not claiming that it is. We're claiming that they had a full extraction and they gave us a report of that full extraction instead of the full extraction on all the devices. It's not what only was available to them. They did have that available, they just didn't give it to us. It's cherry picking. It's
Okay.
cherry picking is what we got.
I don't read your own expert's affidavit the same way you're reading it, but,
That's why I'd like him to be able to come in and explain it. Can we set that up?
well, we can set that up at some point, but again, this is all late, and it's unlikely that anything that's happening would lead to him being allowed to testify, but maybe we'll do that this Friday or something. I don't know. We'll have to squeeze it in, but I'm not going to make the jury wait to do that.
Okay.
We'll be at recess until 1:30.